today for Nutrition Plus 101 is Randy Knight with Central Life Sciences. Randy, we'll let you take it from here.
My name's Randy Knight. I work for Central Life Sciences. I've been with them for 11 years. Been in the feed additive business for way longer time than probably anybody that's going to listen to this podcast. But Central Life Sciences is basic and insect control, and I work for the division of the company that we're the feed additive division. Nutrition Plus has been a customer of ours since its inception, I'm sure. But Dee asked me today to kind of talk about fly control. So what I thought I'd do is start off by just talking about flies, and then at the end we'll kind of talk about the two products. But I'll go ahead and name those two products. One is Alticid and one is Clarifly. They have different modes of action, but I'll go into that a little bit later. But let's talk about flies first. So typically, when we're a company like Nutrition Plus that is concentrating on primarily pasture cattle, be it cow-calf or yearlings, horn fly is going to be the main fly of concentration. That's going to be the fly that actually more or less causes the most damage, cost us the most money from the point of animal agriculture in North America. Probably about, now this slide I'm looking at says 1 billion, but with $4.50 to $5 calves, I would say it's probably closer to 2.3 billion now. That's the impact that one fly has on our industry. So now there's other fly species. There's four total fly species that these two products are efficacious against. Now, I'm kind of wrong there. Alticid is registered for the horn fly only, but Clarifly is registered for these other four species of flies, other three species of flies. That would be housefly, stable fly, and the face fly. Now, housefly, stable fly, horn fly, those four flies we have here in Texas. We typically do not see the face fly south of the Kansas-Oklahoma border. So kind of like the Mason-Dixon line almost is the demarcation line for that particular species of fly. But I'll talk a little bit about the horn fly, about its life cycle, and maybe a little bit about the other two. But since we're primarily going to be concentrating on pasture cattle, the horn fly, as I said, is the fly that is of most concern. So that little fly, it is. Oh, I lost my dang slide presentation there. It's a small black fly. It's about 4 millimeters long. That's the fly that we see. If we go out and look at our cows, if we'd gone out and look at our cows a month ago, we would have seen that fly on them. Even if they were actually on a fly control product, we're still going to see a few flies. Both sexes are blood feeders. They take from 30 to 40 blood meals a day. So you guys that are listening to this, y'all keep that in mind. 30 to 40 blood meals a day. So they remain on the cattle day and night, and their actually adult life cycle can be from 10 to 20 days, kind of depending on the time of year. Probably early in the season, like in May and June, early July, they probably live a little bit longer. Maybe they get out to that 20-day lifespan. But once it gets really hot, it probably is reduced a little bit. So they lay eggs in fresh manure. That female will fly down and lay those eggs within within 5 minutes of that animal defecating. So it's kind of a surface tension thing when we think about when she has the opportunity to lay those eggs. And she'll lay about 50 eggs, and she'll do that more than once. She'll lay eggs over a period of time. They actually mate on that host animal, and the key thing about a hornfly is once they find a host, they pretty much stay there their whole life cycle. Now, if a female fly, flies down to deposit her eggs on a cowpat, and her host Daisy walks off 100 yards, she might fly back up on Blackie, and land on her, but they just don't move from animal to animal. The male actually never leaves the host unless forced by some way, but he'll stay there his entire life cycle. So kind of an interesting thing about the hornfly. They are not strong flyers like some of the other species that we might talk about here in a bit. Their flight distance might be from a quarter to a half a mile, and that would be, riding the wind. So always get a question, and you guys will get this question when you're in the field. Well, how's this going to work if my neighbor's not using this feed-through product through his mineral or his tubs? Well, like I said, those flies are once they find a host, they don't typically move from animal to animal. So yes, you'll get some of your neighbor's flies, but it's just solely because when that fly emerges, your cow is closer to where that fly emerges than say his cows, if they're further away, just not really in reach, or maybe upwind instead of downwind. So one thing that I do a lot of times when I may go on a complaint call, and believe me, y'all are you'll get a few complaints, but there's actually things going on there that cause this. But if he has a pretty good number of flies, I said, well, let's go look at your neighbor's cows, and you can drive by the neighbor's cows where his cows may have 200, 300 flies, and you go by the neighbors and they've got 1,000 to 2,000. So even though you may not be getting the exact results you might want, thinking that you'll have zero fly load, you're going to be getting a benefit from it. I mentioned there a few minutes ago about the number of blood meals those flies take a day. So that hornfly has a biting mechanism, their biting mouthpiece. If you can imagine, and all of us in Texas especially, we've seen a oil field drill bit. Their biting mouthpiece looks exactly like an oil field drill bit. So if you can imagine being an animal with 1,000, 2,000 horn flies on your back, and those flies are taking 30, 40 blood meals a day, how uncomfortable that is. I mean, that'd be like being locked in a room with 1,000 mosquitoes. It would be quite uncomfortable. So that's the reason we see those cattle bunching up and going into the brush, going into the water, doing whatever they can to get away from those those horn flies. So anything we can do to lower that number, be it using a feed-through fly control product like Alticid or Clarifly, or sprays, borons, even rubs, is going to be beneficial to the productivity of our cattle. So another interesting factor, and this really comes into play when we talk about people having complaints. Rainfall can really affect hornfly populations. So typically the time of year that you as a mineral salesman, or me as a Alticid Clarifly salesman, typically the time of year we're going to see the most complaints is going to be August and September. So, and there's a reason for that, especially down here on the South Plains and on the Plains period. We got them on. We always encourage our customers to get on as early as they possibly can, because we'd like to have that manure be treated when the first flies emerge from the ground in the spring, land on our cow, and get ready to start, procreating, start laying eggs in that manure. So we'd like to see them have their mineral out with Alticid or Clarifly in it. Depending on where they are here in north central Texas, probably about middle of February. And the whole idea there is to have that treated. That fly emerges, she lands on the cow, she goes to lay her eggs, and she's laying her egg in treated manure. So therefore, we're gonna stop that first life cycle, or lower the number in that first life cycle, and that puts us ahead for the rest of the year, for the rest of the summer. Now, we get into summer, it gets hot and dry. Our fly numbers are low, but something happens in the summertime. Even we've got low fly numbers because we've got them on the product. But what happens sometime in the summertime, instead of that larva going through its normal cycle, which would be she lays her eggs, they hatch within 2 or 3 days. They go through the larval stage. There's 3 different larval stages, and then they pupate. And that the pupa, y'all all know what a pupa is, but when we talk about these flies, they're typically a little brown, about the size of rat droppings. And what happens, third stage of that third larval stage, that larva moves under that cow pat, and that's where it pupates. Well, typically in wetter times of the year, let's say quote unquote normal weather, that pupa will become an adult and hatch or emerge probably within 4 or 5 days. Well, what happens when it's really hot and dry? That manure pat's drying up, it speeds things up. But instead of that pupa emerging as an adult in 4 or 5 days, they kind of go into the same suspension that they do in the wintertime. So maybe 20%, 25%, maybe even 30% just remain under that cow pat. And we get to August, September, we start getting some late summer rains, and boom, we'll have a really large bloom. And that's when we get calls. And I want you guys to feel free to give me a call. I'm more than happy to come out and visit with any producer that is not getting the results that he has. But I have a method. And when I talk to that producer, I'll tell him, I'll get down there, but it'll be 10 days or 5 days or 2 weeks. Then I might could have come the next day. But the whole idea there is we have that bloom, and as long as we remain on the product, within 10 days, that bloom from those pupa that hatch because of the wet weather, they're going to dissipate. That life cycle is going to be over, and we're going to go back to 200 flies, 150 flies, even less. The product takes back over. It's just the biology of the fly. It's not that the product has failed. It's not that even consumption has gone down. It's just the biology of that fly, and that happens from time to time. And I've got lots of stories of making those calls, and it's always the same thing. Man, I wish you'd have been here 5 days ago. We had thousands of flies, and for some reason they're all gone. And that's really how the biology of that works. So now, as I said, Alticid is registered for the hornfly, and it's been on the market since 1973. We've never had any failure of the product. When I say failure, I mean resistance. Now, a lot of times, perhaps we have a complaint, and it might be we're not getting the consumption we want, or we might test the feed product and it might not be in at the level that we actually need it to be. Or here's usually what the problem is: they're not monitoring their feeders, and they're out of supplement. And when you run out of supplement, when you run out of mineral, or you let your tubs go empty, when that compound is not in that digestive system, and we're not treating that manure, we're not going to get fly control, and we're never ever going to be at a zero fly count, because, as we know, there's always some cows that aren't going to consume the mineral product or the tub. We're just not going to get the consumption that we need on those particular animals. So there's always going to be some untreated manure out there. Therefore, there's always going to be some horn flies. So that's just the way things work. So talking a little bit more about the flies. Flies are vectors for disease, so it's just another reason to control them. Some of the diseases that we see with flies, of course, are pink eye, mastitis, Staph aureus, anaplasmosis. Anaplasmosis, probably the fly that would be most likely to transfer anaplasmosis in a herd, is probably the horsefly, and that's a fly that reproduces in riparian areas, like along the creek, along the ponds, and we're not really able to reach their reproduction area with the compound, so we really have no control over them. But anaplasmosis is quite a problem. Flies are known to vector 65 different diseases, so doing our best to control them is going to put our producers ahead, by a lot. Something interesting also about the hornfly is the impact those high fly numbers might have on the metabolism of those animals. I mean, when we have high fly numbers, we have high stress levels. So that's going to affect, heart rate of the animal, respiration rate, even elevated temperatures just due to that high fly number. Has a real impact on nitrogen retention, because it causes that animal to urinate a lot more. Therefore, it causes it to drink a lot more water. And when we're supplementing protein, supplementing nitrogen to that rumen, and that animal's stressed and urinating a lot, and a lot of that nitrogen we need to increase gains and production is going right out the back end, or right out of that animal. So this is something to keep in mind. When we talk about an economic threshold, that's at two. I mentioned it a couple of times. That's 200 horn flies per animal. So that's really what we're shooting for when we supplement with Alticid or Clarifly. So we want to be below that number, but if we're at 200 flies, that's pretty good. Anything above 400 is just not acceptable, and we're just not doing the job that we want to do. We kind of need to get to the bottom of that. Now, talking about the two different products, Alticid and Clarifly, that they really do the same thing, but they have different modes of action. uh, Alticid mimics a hormone in in that horn fly, so that during the the three larval stages, it prevents that larva from going from stage to stage. So it's not a hormone, just it mimics a hormone in that larva. So it just stops the life cycle there. Clarifly is a chitin inhibitor, and we all know from high school biology, chitin is what the exoskeleton of an insect is made of. And what happens? That larva comes in contact with the diflubenzuron or Clarifly in that manure pat, and when it goes into the pupa stage, it's not able to lay down an exoskeleton, so it does not emerge as an adult fly. So they have different modes of action, but they're really they're really doing the same thing in the end. It's kind of interesting in that it's kind of a you get a biological result. You're not using an adulticide to kill an adult, but you're doing it in a kind of a biological way with a chemical. But it's not a poison. It's just affecting that life cycle of these insects in a different way without actually being a poison that's a problem to other animals. We've got some data, and I'll make that available to Dee to distribute with all the reps. But we've got data on cow-calf data on both products, where we typically see increased weaning weights of up to 20 pounds per animal. We've got many studies that point to that. When we look at using Alticid on yearling cattle, summer grazing cattle, heck, even graze out wheat. Really, when we look at that, it's really surprising to a lot of people. We see on an 80-day grazing period, and this is just not one trial, this is several trials, we see an increased weight gain of over 30 pounds. And that's just from eliminating those flies as a problem to those animals. So y'all keep that in mind when you're talking to your customers. And again, I've got all of that data, that you might want to show your customers if they have questions. Just help you position the products when you're talking to your producers. So, another interesting point that we talk to producers about is mastitis in heifers. Now, when you think of mastitis, you think of that being something in an animal that has been in production, raised a calf or two, and you kind of expect due to damage or the calf transferring bacteria, viral invaders into that mammary tissue. But actually, the hornfly has a big impact on that. So hear of heifers coming into production and never had a calf before, of course, and she's only got one, only got 3/4 or maybe 2/4. And what happens is that during the hot summertime, that hornfly will move from the back to the underside of that animal and get back there to that teat area, and it's exposed and tender, and they will bite that area there and cause some wounds and scabs, and then she goes out and into the pond or lays under the tree in the manure, and you get bacteria up in that mammary tissue. And heck, before she even ever has a calf, you've got that problem. You've got mastitis, and you've ruined a quarter. There's Dr. Nickerson was I'm sure he's retired by now, but he was at Georgia State University, and he did a lot of research on mastitis at dairies, some of those large dairies in Florida. And yeah, I know y'all aren't really calling on dairymen, but this information transfers. 50% of the mastitis that he saw in those dairy cows, in those heifers, 50% of that he attributed to hornfly infestation. So that's just a good thing to keep in mind when you talk to a producer, and ask him if he's ever seen that kind of problem in heifers that he's kept back into his herd. So pretty interesting little piece of data. Talk a little bit about costs. Alticid cost per head per day is from 2 to 3 cents per animal. Now, why the spread? Well, just because we sell our product based on use, and companies that purchase at a certain level, they're going to get a little bit better price than companies that don't. So you guys can rest easy. Y'all are in that 2 cents or maybe a little above level. So when we're talking about production, so let's say it's costing us 2 cents per head per day for 210 days. That's $4.20 an animal. So $4 calves, and we increased our weaning weight by 20 pounds. 4 times 20 is 80. That's a pretty good return on your money just by adding Alticid or Clarifly into our program. So that's more than going to pay for the mineral, and you're going to get lots of added benefits, of course, from having that mineral in your program. So both products cost would be just about the same. So whether you use Alticid or Clarifly, it's totally up to the producer. Again, one thing, Alticid is registered for horn flies alone, and Clarifly is registered for horn flies, house flies, stable flies, face flies. Yeah, I think that covers all 4 flies. So, and I think I already talked about this a little bit. How does it work? Well, they consume the mineral. They consume the Alticid or the Clarifly through the mineral or through the tub, be it a mineral tub or protein tub. And it goes 99.5% unabsorbed. So, and really what that is, we're just measuring what we are able to find in that manure, and it does not go through the wall of the digestive system. It's both products are large molecules. So we're just treating the manure of that animal. We are not treating the animal. So it goes through that digestive system into the manure. That female fly flies down, lays her eggs, returns to the animal. And as I said, 2 different modes of action. The Alticid mimics a hormone in there and prevents the larva from going from stage 1 to stage 2 or stage 2 to stage 3. When we're talking about Clarifly, that larva comes in contact with that and is not able to lay on the chitin exoskeleton once it's in the pupa stage. So both of them are doing the same thing. They are breaking the life cycle. They're just doing it a little bit differently, each one of them. So some of you guys will know me, and I have been a customer of Nutrition Plus since this company first started. I use your mineral, Nutrition Plus mineral. I think the label on it is Bentonite. I think there's a Bentonite Alticid and a Bentonite Clarifly product. And I have some places that I actually have to use tubs in just because I've got high sodium levels in my water and I don't get the consumption on the mineral that I really like. So I'll use tubs out there. But both products are registered for either loose mineral or tubs. So based on, what best fits your customer's needs, you know, which one's going to work the best. If they have trouble getting consumption on a loose mineral, I would always recommend a tub because you're going to get more consumption there. And that I'm sure Dee has talked to you about that as well. Now, Clarifly is also registered for equines. So it's registered for house flies, stable flies, in equines. So typically, when we have horses in a pasture situation, more than likely the fly that's going to be bothering those horses more than anything is actually going to be the horn fly. And when I say a pasture situation, I'm not talking about a 5-acre trap with 20 horses in it. I'm talking about horses that are actually on pasture. So hornfly cannot reproduce in horse manure. So if you've got a customer that got horses pastured by themselves and they've got horn flies, it's really not going to be efficacious against that because those horn flies are actually coming from cattle somewhere. That's where they're reproducing. But when we talk about horses in a more confined situation, those tubs with Clarifly in it are just really efficacious. They do a great job of controlling those nuisance flies there around the barn, the the house fly and the stable fly. So in the stable fly, and we're talking about horses, stable fly is a biting fly, just much like the horn fly. And when we see our horses in the barn fighting flies, really stomping their feet and being uncomfortable, that is typically the stable fly. House fly is more of a nuisance in that they have a sponge mouthpiece, so they're not actually biting the fly; they're just landing on them and kind of irritating them, but not that stable fly. That's a biting fly that takes a blood meal, and then flies away, and then comes back later in the day and perhaps takes another blood meal. So really a good product, really good thing to have if we've got horses up in traps and up near the barn, because that's where we're going to see those type of flies. So I want y'all to know that I am available to each one of you, both myself and or Raina Lewis. We'd be happy to do ride-alongs with you guys in the field. If you've got a customer that you need help with, I'm available too. And if and when, possibility of doing a, little producer meeting. If you had 2 or 3 guys in one area, you wanted to get together and we could buy them lunch and just sit down and visit. Both Raina and I'd be more than happy to work with each one of you guys in the field. So Dee will have all of my information. And with that, I think we'll just end this and thank you for your time.